Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Adonai Adam Vatideichu Ben Enosh Vachashveichu Adam Le'avel Dama Yamav Ketzel Baboke Yatzitz V'chalav L'erev the Molevi Avish Tashev Enosh Adaka Vatomer Shuvu V'nei Adam. We gather to remember Fran with all our hearts, our souls, and our mind. We come together with many mixed emotions, certainly with the emotion of knowing that she is no longer in this world with us, but also acknowledging that she is on her way. In all God's speed to be with those who have gone before her in a reunification of love. Who among us here has not passed through our own trials and bereavement? Some of us bear fresh wounds in our own hearts and therefore feel more keenly the kinship of sorrow with those who love and will always love Fran. Others of us whose mourning is more remote still recall when a silent hug or a kiss or a word brought comfort to our sorrowing hearts. All things pass, all that lives must die, all that we prize is but lent to us. We are travelers on the same road that leads to the same end. We gather with the knowledge that in Judaism, someone really never dies, that their memories, their life, lives on what we call the dor vador, from generation to generation, and as is certainly a tradition in Judaism, for boys and girls that are just born to be named after those who we cherish. So I can certainly foresee in your homes, in years to come, no rush, there will be many little Frans running around, or little, well, Fran can be a boy too, little Fran's boy or girl running around, and they will be taught that they will definitely be taught who they are named after and why they are named after, and the characteristics and the life and the loves of her will be passed down from generation to generation, as we all say, Amen. In the 23rd Psalm, King David writes that God will walk us through the valley of the shadow of death. God never tells King David that he will leave us in that valley. So one day, when you shall wake up, when your mourning period is over, what will be left in your hearts are simply the happy and the joy-filled memories of Mom, of Fran. And those will be the memories that will be lasting in your heart for many decades, many generations to come. So if you know the traditional words of the 23rd Psalm, we say them out loud with all of our hearts as one, together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemy. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Amen. We begin those words of a life well lived with David.
Thank you all for coming and being here with us today. When someone lives a long and active life, as Mom did, there are more stories to tell than the few minutes we are allotted now. I'm sure each of you have your own cherished Fran stories. I'd like to share but a few of mine that bring a smile to my face and capture Mom. She was very compassionate and had a big heart. When I was away at college, Mom was a guidance counselor at Williamstown High School. One of her students, who ultimately would become valedictorian of the class and later a medical doctor, had a very difficult home life. Once Mom became aware of Sandy's situation, she arranged for her to live with our family for the remainder of Sandy's senior year. The joke in the family became, I went away to college and Mom rented out my room. The broader message, Mom fully understood what paying it forward meant, and she lived it. She could be very communicative and very subtle. When I was a 23-year-old bachelor, I bought a townhouse with the help of a loan from the down payment from the Bank of Mom. Her housewarming gift was both subtle and appropriate. She gave me an electric blanket with dual controls. She managed to be a Jewish mother without being in your face about it. She also had an incredible sense of humor and was a good friend. As part of her job as a guidance counselor, she could keep a confidence. Mom knew months in advance of my plan about a surprise trip to Europe for my wife's 50th birthday. A couple of weeks before we were scheduled to leave, she found out my wife found out I was taking her somewhere, but she didn't know where. At dinner that week with Mom, I said, Laura knows we're going somewhere, but she doesn't know where. Mom, without missing a beat, said, I hear Russia is beautiful this time of year. She was incredibly intelligent, an excellent teacher, and a lifelong fearless learner. Can't speak right. Mom stayed technically current. Even in her last week, she was doing Wordle on her phone every day. She had a computer, an iPad, an iPhone, and could email and text. Early on, I'd helped her set up an email account about 15 years ago. It got hacked and tried to scam all of her contacts. We were able to recover the account and then set it up to notify me and her if the password was ever changed again. One Saturday morning a few years ago, when she was in her early 90s, I got an alert that her email password changed. I immediately called her. She said, "Not now. I'm playing bridge. I really can't talk now." I replied, "Mom, your password changed." She replied, "I know. I changed it. Now that I stopped driving, I need to use Uber, but the app wouldn't work on my phone." So I bought an iPad and in setting it up, I changed my password. Fast forward a few weeks, she attended a class at the JCC on how to use the iPad. However, instead of being the student, she ended up helping the instructor teach the class. As it turns out, a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer was also present, and her computer and teaching prowess was documented as a feature article in the paper. Mom, they're over there. Mom, I love you. I'm going to miss you terribly.
Stay to left, exit. Okay. I wanted to thank you all for coming. For those who don't know, I'm Nancy, her daughter, versus Nancy, her daughter-in-law. Yell out Nancy in a Pliskin gathering and 5 people answer. Okay. Frances Rosalind Sudhalter Pliskin, mouthful, was her full name, but she was known by many different names to different people. To friends and colleagues, she was Fran, counselor, Mrs. Pliskin, teacher, and mentor. Her parents always called her Frances, or Faggy. Friends that she knew years ago called her Faggy Razy. Pretty funny. Dad always called her Faggy or Fran. Her New Jersey and New York nieces and nephews called her they called her Aunt, while her Boston nieces and nephews called her Auntie. I thought they were 2 different relatives. Never been too smart. We called her Mom, Mommy, and sometimes Ma, which she hated. She always said she wasn't a sheep. Amazingly bright and vibrant until the end, she had a curiosity and a lifelong want of learning. As David said, she was doing Wordle 4 days ago. We thought she said the word water. We realized she wanted her Wordle. She began to play the piano. Most of you don't know that Mom began to play the piano at the age of 4. She was kind of a music prodigy. She practiced her piano 3 or 4 hours every day. The piano that sits in John's living room was her birthday gift when she was 9. She had a choice whether she felt like going into music or become a teacher. She decided somehow that she would rather be a teacher than be a musician full-time. However, she also loved music, and it ran through her life. I think one of the things that my parents liked together was music. Although my dad didn't sing or play an instrument, he still loved music, and the 2 of them enjoyed it. They loved musicals, classical, Frank Sinatra, Stephen Edie Gourmet, Barbra Streisand, and also traditional music and classical music. I remember a time when I was little that Mom was accompanying the synagogue chorus, and they were practicing in our den. I was about 5. I got out of bed, put my ear to the floor so I could listen. Let's see. She was always the rehearsal pianist for high school musicals, for Mapleshade, probably Williamstown, and for a while I think she even sang in a chorus. They had season tickets to the Philadelphia Orchestra as well as the Schubert, or whatever it was called then. Growing up, mother and father were very, we learned music from them. We always had musicals in the house. John and I know most of them by heart, probably by the time we were 10. And it's always been with me. For those of you who don't know me, I majored in theater, although I don't do it now. I've always loved music, musical theater, and folk music. It went through my life. Growing up, her father and brother were very into baseball. Her brother was a great high school player and even made it to the minor leagues before the war. They went to many games, mostly the Red Sox. She and I had many arguments, since I now live in Boston, that it wasn't okay for her to root for the Phillies. She said, they both wear red uniforms and I live in Philadelphia now. Basically, get over it. In more recent years, she began to be an Eagles fan. She would wear her little hat, her little socks, and her sweatshirt and yell at the TV. Little tiny grandma doing that, pretty funny. Mom and I spoke every Sunday morning at 9:30. I don't know who I will call now. Recently, in one of those phone calls, I asked her if she'd ever done anything risky or dangerous, because I don't see either of my parents that way, particularly my mother. And she told me this story that came as a surprise. One night in the cold in Maine, when Dad was at Bowdoin, Mom was at Bates, and they were dating, Dad and she went for a ride in his terrible car. It was described as a junk heap, probably worse than the ones I used to drive. Anyway, they were on a snowy, curvy road, and the car's lights wouldn't work. Mom told me she got out of the car, they had running boards and fenders those days, and sat on it, while Dad rolled the window down so they could find their way home. I'm like, it's amazing they survived that. But they did, of course. As everyone knows, we're still here. So I was just amazed that my mother would do that. I can't imagine it. Her legacy is in her work and her children. All of us have been raised to be decent people, and we will continue to be that way. And her grandchildren and great-grandchildren have a deep love of music and learning. And, of course, there's always baseball, and I understand tonight there'll be football. Ugh. I will go in the other room and do something else, but that's okay. I appreciate it. We love you, Mom, and you've had a wonderful life. We thank you.
If you had the honor and the privilege of knowing Fran, she went by many names of love to you, a formal name, a nickname, a family name, a silly name. When we say the words, we will remember. Please say the name that she was known to you as specifically in your life, that you called her when you had the blessing of being with her and speaking with her, and the name that she will always be known to you by when you have the honor of thinking of her. Say that name out loud. In the rising of the sun and at its going down, we will remember. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of autumn, we will remember. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember. In the beginning of the year, and when it ends, we will remember. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember. So long as we live, she too will live, for she is now a part of us, as we will always remember. We call up with love Craig.
So at the outset of this, I'd like to mention two things. Number one is that I am definitely going to cry at the end, and number two is that I'm wearing my grandfather's jacket today, so I'm in blue for that reason. One of the last things that my grandmother said to me was that, no, I'm not getting out of the chair. I'm a stubborn old woman. And so first of all, stubbornness gets a bad rap. You want grit. You want to be determined. You want to have stick-to-itiveness. Those are all good things. Stubborn is bad. The thing about stubbornness is that it's all those things, except you keep doing them even when you're faced with information that tells you shouldn't do them anymore. So I'm here to talk about how good stubbornness is. When it's pushed inwardly, it can be destructive. Like, I know I shouldn't smoke cigarettes, but I'm going to do it anyway. I know I shouldn't eat this Big Mac on the way home and then hide the wrapper later, but I'm going to do it anyway. But when it's pushed in a good direction, stubbornness can be life-changing. And I want to honor the stubbornness that made my grandmother her, because she was told by society, by the world, don't go to college. That's not what women do. You go become a typist or a wife. You don't go to college. And she graduated in 3 years and was the first Jewish woman to graduate from Bates. Then she was told, don't marry that man. I don't know if you've met my grandfather before. It's not the worst advice in the world. Not only was she stubborn enough to marry him, even though her parents didn't want her to, do you know how stubborn you have to be married to anyone for 60-something years, let alone that guy for 60 years? That requires an awful lot of stubbornness. Then she went into her career, and she advanced in her career at a time where women weren't supposed to be leaders. That was the men's job. That's what men did. They ran a school, and she ran a school anyway, because stubbornness, when it pushed in the direction of, I'm going to do what's right for the school and the community, I'm going to do it anyway, made her her. Then we get into the older part of her life, and my grandfather was the admiral of his POW society, and he passed away. So who became the admiral? The stubborn old woman that wouldn't stop doing things that you're not supposed to do. And the thing about stubbornness is it's like curly hair. It's dominant. It doesn't skip a generation. My father was a computer person in the 1980s when the computers were as big as this casket, and they're in our basement, and he was struggling to make ends meet, but he didn't quit. And computers run the world. We all have a computer in our pocket. He's able to have a very long, lucrative career in the career field. My uncle, okay, so he's so stubborn that he let that stubborn old woman stay in his house for the last decade and not give up, even though all the information said it would be easier to get her a home or have her go somewhere else. He had the stubbornness to have her stay there. My aunt, she gets to retire soon and gets to travel the world because she had a stubbornness of a dedication to her career that I don't even think she liked the entire time I've been alive, but she wouldn't let that get in the way, and she's built a future where she can go to Alaska and go to Norway and go to Texas and do all the things she wants to do because she didn't quit. And so stubbornness carries to me too. Like, I don't know how many of you golf in this room, but I was a terrible golfer when I first started. On my birthday, a couple years ago, I started golfing. A good score for like a normal person's like an 80. I got like 130. Like, do you know how bad you need to be to like get 130? That's like 2 rounds ago. Well, this past year, I was able to win the Houston area amateur tour and got to play in Myrtle Beach because I'm stubborn. Because even when the evidence is against you, like from my grandmother, I just kept doing it anyway, even though you're not supposed to. So this is the part where I'm going to cry. So I have a 5-year-old, and she attends the Aristotle Academy, which does classical education. For those of you who don't know what that is, you can just call it class, like education. Like I call it classical, but for you guys, it was just education. And what they do there is they have a lot of resuscitation where they make the kids learn things and then say them back, like they repeat them. And she's 5 and she's in kindergarten, and she had to do a project about the bones in the body. And one day she said to me, "Daddy, what's 4 plus 4?" I said, "That's 8." I said, "You tell me what's 4 plus 3." She said, "I don't know. Let me take out my phalanges and I'll tell you." And I think it's really important that she doesn't change schools, because if she does, she's definitely going to get beat up on the playground for counting her phalanges in class. Well, they had a bone project where they had to learn bones, and then they had to go into class and recite 7 bones. And if they couldn't recite 7 bones, they lost, 15 points for each one. And so at night, she had to remember the bones. So she made up a song to the bones, and I can hear, we still use a monitor because my wife is paranoid. And so we have a baby monitor. You could hear her like reciting the bones. And at first she wasn't remembering them all, and then she remembered them, and she said to herself while she was laying in bed, like, "You can do this. You got it. You can do this." And she got her 100, and I just think that stubbornness that I cannot parent out of my own child comes from her, and I'm just glad I get to live on. So thank you.
I just Googled the word phalanges, but I didn't know how to spell it. So, is it PH or F? Okay. With love, we call up Joan.
I was hoping so much I didn't have to follow you, Craig, really, but I'll try my best. First of all, let me begin by saying my name is Arlene. I'm a former high school guidance counselor, and I worked with Fran and under Fran. She was my supervisor at one time. I also am a part of the infamous Scrabble Club. There are 5 of us, and I think our Scrabble group is reflective of Fran in that we are so eclectic, it's unbelievable. We have 2 Jewish, we have a Protestant, we have a former nun, we have a gay, and we have a practicing Catholic. I won't go into politics, what we are for politics, I won't go into that. But I think the example, we always would meet monthly with Fran. I think the example that was set for us is that we can come together even though we were different, and we learn from each other. And we loved being with her. She was a very wonderful and bright woman. And my wish for the world is that there were more Scrabble clubs in this world like that. I think we'd be a better world. Now, June has asked one of our members to speak today on behalf of her. However, she came down with COVID this morning, so she's unable to do it. Fortunately, she gave this to Nancy ahead of time, so I'm going to read what she wrote on behalf of Fran, okay? Who is Fran Pliskin? For someone who lived so long, 97 plus years, she is someone different to all who knew her. On the familiar side of Fran, she was a daughter, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a sister, an aunt, or aunt, depending where you're, okay, I'm listening. Okay, an aunt, sister-in-law. Fran's family, and this is the truth, she talked about them all the time, meant the world to her. Though they might have been apart geographically, they were always in her heart. Fran was an avid reader. She chaired many book clubs. She was an educator, a school administrator, a counselor, and a director of counseling. Whatever Fran did, she got involved and she made her mark. There is not a counselor in the Burlington County school system who has not known Fran. Even after she retired, Fran continued to be involved. And remember, this is Joan saying this. Even after she retired, she stayed involved. I met Fran somewhere in the 90s when I was in Burlington County School Counselor. Fran extended her outreach to the State Counselor Association and was their treasurer for many years. Fran traveled to North Jersey for their monthly meetings, and in addition, she took on the role of treasurer in the county association. Somehow, I became connected to the state association and witnessed Fran and how she functioned in her leadership roles in our state and county organizations. Fran Pliskin is a legacy in our state and county, truly. Given all Fran's involvement in the county, we honored her with the Frances Rosalind Pliskin Scholarship, given to several students each year who submit essays on how a counselor has helped them in their life. Our county college fair provides the funds for this scholarship. She began that college fair years ago for Burlington County College. In the schools where Fran has served, especially in Maple Shade and Morristown, Fran was known for her caring and professional demeanor. Her students are now adult professionals, and they revere her. Some of her students are doctors and other professionals. Her doctor has even been known to make house calls because they are serving someone they knew and respected. Humbly, Fran accepted their gracious service. Fran has been active throughout all of her 97 years. After retirement, there are 5 of us counselors who work together on the college fairs with Fran, who decided to maintain our relationship by meeting to play Scrabble. We tried to make it monthly as best as we could with our schedules, which seemed to be busier than our working days. When Scrabble was no longer an option due to Fran's health, we visited her at home. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, we read of the valiant or virtuous woman. She is a woman of strength and dignity and has no fear of old age. When she speaks, her words are wise, and kindness is the rule for everything she says. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting. The woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her a reward for her labors, and let her words praise her at the city gates. This is Fran. While she appeared to have diminishing capacity, her mind was always active. She kept herself aware of world and local issues. She knows what is going on in our world. If one of her friends were ill and experienced setbacks, Fran didn't hesitate to call and inquire about their health. She is a caring woman and one who has left us with the wonderful example of how to live and love. Psalm 27, my favorite, speaks to me of Fran. One thing I ask of the Lord, this is to seek, to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, that I may gaze on the loveliness of the Lord and contemplate his temple. For he will hide me in his abode in the day of trouble. He will conceal me in the shelter of his tent. He will set me high upon a rock. Even now, my head is held high above my enemies on every side, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts and gladness. I will sing and chant praise to the Lord. Shalom. You are remembered, dear Fran. Go in peace now and fly with the angels. We love you, Fran.
And to the family, you have already started, no doubt, to fill out all these forms that simply must be filled out on behalf of Mom. And those will continue in the days, the weeks, and even months to continue with all these different forms that simply must be done on her behalf. On all these forms will be the date of Mom's birth. Many of the forms will be followed by a little dash. And then after the dash is the date of her passing, certainly. What's important is her birthday, so each and every year you can remember it with love for her heavenly birthday. And in Judaism, of course, the date of passing is of utmost importance to light the yahrzeit, the remembrance candle. But even more important than that date of birth or that date of passing, the two book and dates is that little dash. For that little dash is a symbol of so much love received, and certainly as we hear from your kind words of love, so much love given. So when you continue to fill out all these forms that simply must, for many reasons, be done, look at the two bookend dates of a life, but even more importantly, look at that little dash. For that little dash is a symbol of the highest compliment that you could ever call a Jewish woman. And that, of course, is a Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. And on that, certainly, we all say, Amen. We now call up with words Gail.
Thank you, John, and your family for this gift to talk about Frances, my friend. And she was indeed to so many, many of us. Fran was my friend for over 50 years. She and Irving and their family included Louis and me in many family gatherings. John was our first bar mitzvah. Serious and an ongoing inclusion. My mother told me she believed one soul is what you pass on to those you have touched. Oh my goodness, this outrageous, wonderful, fierce, sassy, family-loving, sports-loving, book-loving, music and theater-loving, book leader, teacher, counselor, student-loving, friend-loving, bridge master, touched a whole village of us. Thank you, Frances Pliskin, and thank you to all of you, her family and her friends. And the Eagles are going to win tonight. For Fran.
We call up with love, Jerry.
So it's not so easy to get here at the last minute. My name is Jerry Neiman. I'm from Austin, Texas. And I got in last night. So before I left home, I said to my son, why don't you write something for me to say at the funeral? He said, Dad, just get up there and say what you're going to say. So she was my favorite aunt. I always felt really close to her. And you've all said a lot of beautiful things about her and her accomplishments. So I'm going to tell you something that she couldn't do. But first, I just want to say that when I was in college, I went to Rutgers, lived down the road from the Pliskin, Fran and Irv, and she created the kind of a house where you didn't have to call ahead. At least I never called ahead. I just could show up. And I could take her car if I wanted to and go pick up my girlfriend, who I eventually married, lived in Teaneck. Car I had wasn't a good highway car, let's put it that way. She had a wonderful car. I may be corrected. I think it was a 52 Plymouth. But it was the kind of Plymouth that had the shades, the over the top, you know? It was, what's that? Oh, it was a Chrysler New York. No, it's my story. But I did give Fran something to tease me about for my entire life. because I would always bring my laundry and drop it off. And she chose to remember that. So fortunately, last summer we were driving up the East Coast. Unfortunately, we had very little time, and we had one of these dates in Teaneck, a dinner set up that we had to get to, and we got later and later, but we still stopped and saw Fran for like 30 minutes. So I got to see her, and I've talked to her a few times before she passed away. But about 4 years ago, I was on the phone, and now I'm going to tell you about what she didn't know how to do. I was on the phone with Fran, and my wife was in the middle of making potato latkes, and she had to leave. And she just slapped the recipe down on the table, said, "Here's the recipe, here are the potatoes, make the latkes." So I started laughing because I do like to cook, but I hate to follow recipes. I never follow recipes. And here, I just started laughing, and I said to Fran, "You're going to have to help me through this." And she said, "Oh, no, I'm not. John makes the potato latkes." So it was really a pleasure to hear from all of you and sharing the things that you shared about Fran. She was really a special lady.
Before we close on the prayer of our departed, the family would like those who would choose to give from your hearts in the name of Fran to give to the Francis R. Pliskin High School Scholarship, and all that information is either on the Platt Chapel website or on information that has been given out. Shiva will be straight from Locust Wood Cemetery at the home of John and Nancy at 200 Sandringham Road in Cherry Hill, straight from the cemetery till tonight at 8:15 when the Eagles game will be turned on. And then tomorrow on Tuesday and Wednesday beginning at 3 o'clock. If you are able to, we rise for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim shochein b'amromim hametzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei ashchina im kedoshim etorim gezerah rakia mazirim et nishmat Tzipora Shoshana bat Archie Alta Shelach Leolama Barachamim Yas Tirea Beseitzer Kinafav Leolamim Vitra Achaim En Nishmata Adonai Hunachalata Vitanuach B'shalom al mishkava v'no more. Amen. Once again, in the space provided, please say the name that Fran will forever be known to you as in love. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to who has entered eternity, O God of mercy. Let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us all say, you may be seated.